When my daughter made her first million, she cut me off. Said I was an embarrassment, a relic from a life she wanted to forget. I congratulated her, sent her a heartfelt letter, and disappeared. Years later, she tried to get into an elite business network I once helped found under a different name. What happened next was rather unexpected. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Simon Green from London. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I remember the exact moment I saw her name trending. I was sitting in the kitchen with the same chipped coffee mug I'd used for the last decade, the one she gave me on Father's Day when she was 9. Hashtag Gina James was splashed across the sidebar of the business news app one read every morning like gospel. The headline read, "From food stamps to fortune, meet the tech star who rebuilt herself." I clicked on it out of habit, not thinking it'd be her. How often do you see your own kid in the financial section? But there she was. That face I knew better than my own. Polished, pristine, framed by soft curls and a power blazer. Her eyes were cold. Not angry, just clinical. A version of her I hadn't met yet. The article read like a fairy tale scrubbed clean of any mess. It praised her journey out of poverty, the hustle, the grind, the late nights coding in cafes, the seed round that blew up into a multi-million-dollar brand. It mentioned a troubled family background and how she had to cut off toxic relationships to chase success. That line, that's the one that stuck in my chest like a shard of glass. I read it again, slower this time, hoping I misunderstood it. But it was there in black and white. I was the toxic relationship. I was the relic she needed to bury so she could be reborn. I remember setting the phone down gently, as if sudden movement would shatter me entirely. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, letting the coffee go cold, wondering what memory she had twisted to justify that headline. I had raised her alone since she was 5. Her mother died of an aneurysm on a Sunday morning, right there on the bathroom floor. I remember the sound Gina made, this small, sharp wail, like a teacup cracking under pressure. From that moment, everything became about survival. I closed the hardware store I'd just opened, took a job driving a delivery truck. I worked nights, weekends, birthdays. I missed moments I can't get back because I was out making sure there was food, that the rent got paid, that her field trip permission slips didn't go unsigned. I used to joke that the only thing I owned outright was my regret. But Gina, she was my pride. I bragged about her to everyone, even when she barely texted back. She's in tech now, I'd say to the guy at the corner store. Built a whole app from scratch. I'd hold my phone out with her Instagram pulled up like it was some sacred thing. When she first got into that startup accelerator in Seattle, I sent her a care package. Just some snacks, a handwritten note, and a check for $500. It was nearly all I had in savings, but I wanted her to feel supported. She sent me a 3-word reply. Thanks. Got it. That was when the shift began. Slowly at first. Calls went from weekly to monthly. She stopped telling me about her projects. I found out she moved to New York through one of her Twitter posts. Then came the photos, cocktail parties, rooftop panels, brunches with founders I only ever read about. I used to comment now and then, just a heart emoji or "so proud of you, sweetie." But I stopped when I noticed she'd delete my comments. No explanation. Just gone. The day she made her first million, she didn't call. I found out through a podcast. A friend had forwarded it to me. "Isn't this your daughter?" he'd asked. I clicked play, already tense. The host gushed over her success, the way she'd pulled herself up with no help. And then she said it, clear, direct, cold as winter. I had to distance myself from people who reminded me of struggle. I needed a clean slate. Even my family was a liability. Liability. Like I was some outdated app that slowed her down. I paused the audio. My thumb hovered over the rewind button. But I didn't need to hear it again. The first time had already carved enough damage. That night, I sat at my desk with the soft hum of the desk lamp and wrote her a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter. I told her I was proud. That no amount of money could ever dim the light I saw in her when she was 5, dressed as a dinosaur for Halloween because we couldn't afford a princess costume. I told her I remembered her first pitch, selling bookmarks made of duct tape at the school fair. I reminded her that I believed in her before anyone else did. And I didn't ask for anything. Not a visit. Not money. Not even forgiveness. Just that she know I was still rooting for her. I included a photo of her and her mom from the old Polaroid stash in the garage. Her mom had her on her hip, both of them covered in flour from some failed attempt at baking cookies. Gina couldn't have been more than 4. I dropped the letter in the mailbox the next morning. No ceremony. Just folded it up and walked it down the block, my hands stiff from the cold. I didn't expect a reply, but I hoped. You never really stop hoping with your kids, no matter how far they push you away. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing. No call. No card. Not even a text. Just a silence, so deep it felt like she'd buried me. I kept waiting for the moment she'd circle back, realize she'd gone too far. But she didn't. She kept rising, kept posting, kept smiling in photos where I didn't exist. Eventually, I stopped checking. I put her number on silent. Not blocked, just quiet. I didn't want to miss anything, but I couldn't keep hurting myself on the sharp edge of her success. People say success changes you, but I think it just reveals who you were always becoming. And she had been building this distance for years. I just didn't want to see it. Still, I never stopped rooting for her. I just did it from farther away. Like watching fireworks from behind a hill. You can't see the colors, but you hear the echo. You feel the heat, even if it's not meant for you. The last time we sat across from each other in person was at a sleek little cafe in Manhattan's Flatiron district. I had taken a red-eye flight just to see her. She said she could squeeze in an hour between a pitch meeting and a networking dinner. The place was all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. The kind of place where coffee cost $7 and conversations were measured in status, not sincerity. I wore my best suit, navy blue, a little loose from the weight I'd lost recently, with a tie that had seen too many weddings and not enough joy. She showed up 15 minutes late, phone glued to her hand, already talking to someone else as she slid into the seat across from me. She didn't make eye contact until her latte arrived. "Sorry, chaos today," she said, her voice flatter than I remembered. "Let's be quick, okay?" There was a moment during that lunch when I realized she was embarrassed by me. I saw it in the way she glanced sideways when I mispronounced the name of the cafe, or when I asked the waitress if they had regular sugar instead of agave. But the real punch came when I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small photo album I'd brought with me. Just a few shots, her graduation, her high school robotics team, that one Christmas where she cried because I gave her a knockoff iPod and she thought it was real. I thought we might reminisce. She didn't even touch the album, just gave a polite smile and said, "Dad, I'm kind of pivoting away from that version of myself. That life. It's not really who I am now." I didn't know what to say to that. How do you respond when your child tells you that you are part of the life they're discarding? There was something chilling about the way she said it. Not cruel, just calculated. Like it was a necessary step in her brand's evolution. She told me that authenticity was currency now, but only the kind that fit a certain aesthetic. People don't want the messy truth. They want grit with a glow-up. Trauma turned into a talking point. You know, I didn't. Not really. I just nodded. I kept my hands clasped together on the table, gripping the edge of the photo album like it might float away. She noticed and added, "It's not personal, Dad. It's just business." I smiled, but it felt like my teeth were grinding into dust. She talked a bit more, mostly about her investors, her plans to expand, her brand partnerships. I couldn't follow most of it, not because I didn't understand business, but because none of it included me. I was a ghost in the room, a sentimental relic she had to entertain out of guilt. At one point, I tried to lighten the mood. I made a joke about how she used to code on that busted old laptop I got from a pawn shop. I said, "Guess that $75 Dell had some magic in it, huh?" She laughed, but not warmly. It was the kind of laugh you give to someone who's overstayed their welcome. Then she said something that's never left me. Honestly, I kind of reframe that part when I tell my story now. It sounds better when I say I borrowed a friend's MacBook. Just makes it cleaner. Cleaner. Like her real past was dirt she had to wash off. Like I was part of a stain. Later that night, I called my sister Rita. She was always the one who tried to see both sides. She said I shouldn't take it so hard. Gina's trying to survive in a world we don't understand, she told me. You know how cutthroat it is for women in tech? Maybe this is her armor. But armor doesn't erase people. Armor protects. Gina wasn't protecting herself. She was rebranding. And in that rebrand, there was no room for the man who once pawned his wedding ring to buy her a graphing calculator. I didn't say that to Rita. I just listened, nodded along, and let the conversation drift to safer waters. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been cast in a story I never agreed to. One where I was the villain or the cautionary tale, or worse, the background noise. And the thing is, I wasn't perfect. I made plenty of mistakes. Times when I yelled too loud, or worked too long, or showed up late to a school play because my shift ran over. But I never stopped loving her. Not once. Every decision I made was to build a life where she wouldn't have to carry the same weight I did. And now, it felt like the reward for all of that was erasure. A clean slate that required my absence. I tried one last time to reach her after that lunch. Just a short message. I love you. I'm proud of you. I hope you always remember where you came from. She didn't reply. Didn't even leave it on read. I told myself maybe she was busy. Maybe it got buried. But deep down I knew. She had filed me away with the rest of the unpolished parts of her life. The parts that didn't photograph well. The parts that reminded her of who she used to be. I stopped trying after that. Stopped watching her interviews, stopped checking her socials. Every time I caught a glimpse of her smile online, it felt like it was aimed at a version of herself that no longer had a father. But even as I let go of the fantasy that she might come back, I held onto the letter. I had written a copy of it before I mailed it, folded it neatly, slipped it into a manila envelope, and tucked it in the back of my desk drawer. Sometimes, late at night, I'd take it out and read it again. Not because I expected a reply, but because I needed to remember that I tried, that I didn't meet her silence with spite, that I still loved her, even from the other side of the glass wall she'd built between us. 3 years passed before her name found its way back into my world, and when it did, it came cloaked in professionalism and dressed like a stranger. I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room on the 15th floor of a building I helped finance before founder became a buzzword. The room smelled like dry-cleaned suits and overpriced cologne, and the walls were lined with men and women who had learned to wear legacy like a second skin. We were reviewing quarterly applications for the Vesta Network, an elite private collective for high-growth entrepreneurs, investors, and decision-makers. I had co-founded it decades ago under a different name, back when handshakes still meant something and no one cared if you had followers, only if you had vision. These days, vision came with a pitch deck and a polished sob story. That morning, I was flipping through a stack of new applications when I saw it. Her name, printed on heavy, linen-textured paper. Gina J. Miran, CEO and founder of Junipero Labs. At first, the name didn't land. I blinked, turning the page, thinking I'd read it wrong. But there it was again, her photo clipped to the inside of the folder. A high-res headshot in monochrome tones, chin tilted, soft curls in place. Jaw set with that mixture of ambition and defiance that I remembered far too well. I felt my chest tighten. It was her. But not the her I'd raised. The girl who once built a robot out of scrap parts and giggled when it fell apart. No, this woman looked like she could sell you your own house and make you thank her for it. Her bio had no mention of family, no hint of origin, no breadcrumbs back to the truth. It spoke of resilience, of vision, of escaping systemic dysfunction to rise as a leader in tech accessibility. Escaping. That word scratched at me like sandpaper against old wood. I was the dysfunction, and now she wanted in. There was something absurd about it. I could feel the irony swell in my throat like a bitter laugh I didn't let out. She had no idea I was still on the board. Probably thought I'd faded away like the rest of the struggles she had rebranded into footnotes. But there I was, my name still etched in the marble plaque in the lobby, my vote still equal to anyone else's in that room. I sat there silently, fingers resting on the folder as the conversation turned to her pitch. The other board members, unaware of our connection, were impressed. Junipero is innovative, someone said. She's been on 3 30 under 30 lists. We'd be fools not to bring her in. Another member nodded, adding, she's exactly the kind of brand we need. Grit, poised, tech-savvy. She's a walking PR campaign. I didn't speak. Not for a long while. I just let them talk. Let them praise her like she was a discovery and not the product of decades of sacrifice. And when the vote came around, I picked up my pen, paused for a breath, and circled declined. No explanation. No defense. Just a quiet mark of refusal. I placed the folder at the bottom of the pile, face down, and leaned back in my chair like nothing had changed. But everything had. After the meeting, I lingered in the hall, watched the city buzz below, lights flickering like neurons in a machine too big to understand. I thought about calling her. Thought about writing another letter, something short and sharp. You wanted to forget me, so I let you. But I didn't. I didn't need to. The decision was made, and my silence would speak louder than any reply she never gave me. Sometimes, the best closure is the absence of permission. The emails began 2 days later. The first was from her assistant. Cheerful, professional, asking if there had been a clerical error. Ms. Mirren was confident the application was a strong fit. It read, "Would it be possible to revisit her eligibility?" I didn't answer. The second came directly from her. The subject line, "Dad." Just that. I stared at it for a long time. My finger hovered over the mouse like touching it might burn me. I opened it. There were only 4 lines. "I didn't know you were still involved with Vesta. I'm guessing I deserve the silence. Can we talk? Please." I closed the tab and walked away from my computer. I didn't delete it. I didn't reply. I just let it sit there in my inbox like an open wound I didn't bother to bandage. The next morning, there was a voicemail. Her voice cracked slightly. An attempt at vulnerability, or maybe it was real. I don't know anymore. "Hi, it's me. I guess I should have figured you'd still be on the board. I know we haven't talked. I know I said things I can't unsay. But I'm trying now, okay? I'm building something, and I want to do it the right way. I'd really like to hear from you. Even if it's just to yell at me. Anything's better than this." But it wasn't. It really wasn't. Because yelling would have meant I still needed her to understand, and I didn't. I had already made peace with the fact that we were strangers who once shared a home. I let the voicemail sit. Didn't delete it. Didn't save it. Just let it sit like a note left under a door I'd already locked. That Friday, at the quarterly Vesta Gala, things escalated. I was there, wearing a black tux I hadn't dusted off in years, sipping on overpriced champagne, talking shop with a few old friends. Then I saw her. She walked in uninvited, in a sleek black dress with silver heels, her head held high, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. There was a moment where the crowd seemed to fade. Just her and me, across a room full of power and pretense. She walked straight toward me. I stayed where I was. She stopped 2 feet in front of me, her expression unreadable. "I wanted a chance to explain," she said softly. "You had years for that." I replied, my voice calm but cold. She looked down, then back up. I was trying to move forward. "You already did," I said. "I'm just staying out of your way." The silence that followed was brutal. People noticed. A few heads turned. She blinked fast, her jaw tightening. "You think this is punishment?" she whispered. "That this is some lesson you're teaching me?" "No," I said, setting my glass down. "This isn't about punishment. It's about honesty. You cut me out." I just held the door open. She didn't respond. She turned and walked out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. I didn't follow. I didn't look back. I just stood there, still and steady, like a man who finally understood that some bridges are meant to burn, not in rage, but in quiet resolve. 2 weeks passed after the gala, and I heard nothing. No emails, no calls, no texts. Just the same thick silence we'd lived in for years, now pulsing with the weight of that brief, icy exchange. But unlike the silence she gave me when she cut me out, this one didn't sting. It felt like the calm after a long, violent storm. Messy, yes, but over. The quiet wasn't filled with what-ifs anymore. It was firm, final. I had drawn a line, and for the first time in a long while, I stood on the right side of it. Still, part of me waited. Not out of hope, but curiosity. I wondered how long it would take before her ego wrestled with her pride, and she reached out again, not to apologize, but to get what she wanted. And she did. On a cold Thursday morning, while I was fixing the sagging gutter on my back porch, my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I let it ring out the first time, not recognizing the number. But when it rang again, same number, 30 seconds later, I pulled it out and answered. No greeting, just her voice, sharp and rehearsed. Hi, I know you're busy. I'm not trying to fight. She paused, like she expected me to say something. I didn't. I just held the phone, waiting. I just want to understand, she continued, her voice quieter now. You didn't even give me a reason. You just blocked me. There was that word again, blocked, like I was a gatekeeper and not a man who'd been shoved out of his own child's life. You gave me a reason, I said finally, my tone flat. You gave me a dozen. You just didn't expect them to echo back. That was years ago, she said, frustrated now. People grow. People change. Do they? I asked, wiping my hands on a rag. Or do they just get better at hiding what they think? She sighed, the kind of sigh that's more about show than emotion. Look, this is bigger than us now. I've built something. Investa could make or break the next phase of my company. You don't have to like me, but you don't need to stand in the way either. That right there, that line, was the nail in the coffin. She wasn't calling because she missed me, not because she regretted what she said, not even to apologize for the podcast or the article or the erasure. No, she was calling because she needed access, because the bridge she burned turned out to lead somewhere important. And now she wanted me to pretend it never went up in flames. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, you made it clear you didn't want me in your life. Now you're upset I'm not in your way. I waited a beat, then added, you're smart, Gina. You'll figure something out. Without me. Like you always said you did. She went silent. Long enough that I thought she might have hung up. Then, quietly, I didn't think you'd be this petty. That one hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because it showed how little she understood. This isn't petty, I said, my voice low and deliberate. Petty would have been leaking your application. Petty would have been going on a podcast to air out our dirty laundry. This is restraint. You call me a liability. I'm just agreeing with you. She didn't respond. I heard a faint rustling, her adjusting in her chair maybe, or biting back whatever insults she wanted to throw. Eventually, she said, okay, I see where we stand, and hung up without another word. Later that night, I got a call from Rita. She had heard. Somehow she always did. She told me you blocked her from Vesta, she said, her voice cautious but not accusatory. You really did it? I did, I said, sipping my tea. Rita was quiet for a beat. Then, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not. But I keep thinking, maybe she needed to lose something to understand what she gave up. She already did, I said calmly. She just hasn't felt it yet. Maybe, Rita whispered. But if she ever does come around, she won't. I cut in, not cruelly but firmly, because coming around would mean admitting she was wrong. And she built her whole life on the idea that she wasn't. We hung up after that. No hard feelings. Just two people on opposite sides of a story that didn't have a clean ending. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, but because of the clarity. Sometimes the clearest truth still hurts. I kept thinking back to when Gina was little, how she used to beg me to stay up just 5 more minutes to finish her bedtime story. She used to say, please, Daddy, don't let the chapter end yet. And I never could say no. But now, the chapter had ended. She turned the page without me. I just refused to follow. The fallout was more visible than I expected. A week after the call, a tech gossip blog ran a blind item about a female founder being quietly blackballed from a major network due to a family scandal. The comments speculated wildly, some guessing correctly. She posted a vague Instagram story about cutting ties with toxic energies, then deleted it. A few of her old followers came for her in the comments, questioning the authenticity of her rags to riches story. One even unearthed an old high school yearbook photo of the two of us, arm in arm, captioned "The Real MVP Dad." It went semi-viral. She didn't respond to it. Just let it disappear into the algorithm. I didn't share the photo. I didn't comment. I didn't send her a message saying, see, people remember. I just watched it unfold like a man watching his own history being rewritten by people who had only heard the highlights. And maybe that was the worst part. Not the silence. Not even the betrayal. But the way the world kept spinning. Cheering, gossiping, forgetting. As if our story wasn't still alive in both of us. There's something peculiar about walking the streets where you used to be needed. The trees seem smaller, the mailbox is shorter, and the cracks in the pavement look like old scars you used to trip over, but now barely notice. I hadn't walked our old neighborhood in years, not since Gina left for college, not since she came back for that one summer and declared the town stagnant. But on that breezy Sunday afternoon, something pulled me there. Maybe the weight of everything that had passed between us, maybe just the ache of memory. I parked 3 blocks away on purpose, just to take the long walk past familiar houses with unfamiliar paint jobs and strangers' curtains drawn against the fall chill. And when I turned the corner and saw our old house, I stopped. It still had the crooked mailbox she painted purple when she was 12. I remember she spilled the paint and tried to cover the concrete with grass clippings, thinking I wouldn't notice. I noticed, but I never told her. I just left it, because her joy, back then, was more valuable than a clean driveway. I stood there for a long while, not trespassing, just remembering. The new owners had added a porch swing and a fresh coat of yellow paint, but the bones were the same. I could still see the outline of the hopscotch path we drew with chalk on the sidewalk, the faint discoloration where the wading pool used to sit every summer. She would splash until her lips turned blue, refusing to come inside until I bribed her with microwave popcorn and Disney reruns. I thought about how much of myself I had buried in that soil, my savings, my energy, my dreams. All of it poured into her like concrete, hoping she would stand taller than I ever could. When I got back home, I opened the drawer where I kept the copy of the letter, the one I had sent her years ago when she hit her first million and erased me with a soundbite. It was yellowing at the edges now, the ink fading slightly, but the words still held. I read it aloud, slowly, like I was trying to remember the man who wrote it. It wasn't bitter, just proud. I had wanted so badly for her to feel my pride, to feel that her success hadn't come out of a vacuum, but out of a life, out of love. And yet, she never opened it. Or if she did, she never let it change anything. Still, I couldn't throw it away. Some part of me still needed her to know that I had been there, even when she closed the door. That night, Rita showed up with a manila folder in her hand, and a look I knew too well, part sisterly concern, part righteous meddling. "I pulled this from the office," she said, setting it on my kitchen table. "I thought you should see what they actually sent her." I raised an eyebrow. She worked in the admin department at Vesta and had always had a soft spot for Gina, even when Gina didn't deserve it. "Is this legal?" I asked, only half kidding. Rita shrugged. "Legal enough for family." I opened the folder and saw it. A rejection letter, templated, polite, cold. It listed no reason for denial, just thanked her for her interest and encouraged her to apply again next year. There was a sticky note clipped to the bottom, addressed to Ms. Mirren. It read, "We regret that we cannot offer membership at this time. Best of luck in your future endeavors." It was so sterile it could have been written by a bot. I stared at it, imagining her opening the envelope, realizing what it meant, and then flipping it over, looking for something more. An explanation, a loophole, a lifeline. But there was nothing, just the same silence she had once gifted me. Rita watched me for a long time, then said, "You know she's unraveling a little, right? Not just over this. Over everything. She's not as invincible as she pretends." "She never was," I said, folding the letter back into the folder. "She's not her mother, either," Rita added softly. That one landed like a dull blade in my chest. Because she was right. And maybe that's what made all of this harder. Her mother had been different. Tough, but tender. Sharp, but never cruel. If she had lived, maybe Gina wouldn't have had to build her strength in such brutal solitude. Or maybe she would have still walked away, just with a little more grace. I didn't say anything, just stood, walked to the hall closet, and pulled out a small padded envelope. I placed the original letter inside, sealed it, and wrote Gina's address across the front. No note, no explanation, just the same letter she never answered, now yellowed and worn, sent back like a mirror. A reminder, a record. I walked it down to the mailbox and let it go. Not to restart anything, not to heal what wouldn't be healed, but because I needed her to hold it in her hands one more time. To know that love didn't vanish just because she rebranded the pain. 3 days later, she posted a tweet. No names, no details, just a single line. Some bridges burn in silence. It got thousands of likes. Some people applauded her strength. Others speculated it was about a breakup or a business fallout. No one knew it was about me. But I did. And that was enough. It was a month after I mailed her the letter when her final message came. A short email, sent at 2:37 a.m., with no subject line and no attachments. I had been awake, not because I was expecting it, but because at my age, sleep rarely shows up when it should. The subject line was blank, but the body was not. It read, "I was young and stupid. You were always there, and I didn't want to admit it. I can't change what I said, but I remember everything. I'm sorry. I just wanted you to know." That was it. No grand apology. No request for reconnection. Just a brief confession, like something she'd been rehearsing in the back of her mind for years and finally decided to write down before she lost her nerve. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the words settle like dust on the furniture you've stopped expecting company for. I didn't reply, not out of spite, not because I didn't care, but because I had already said everything I needed to say. Years ago, in a letter she didn't read until it suited her. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by the quiet hum of a house that once echoed with the sounds of her childhood. The creak of the stairs she used to stomp down. The soft tap of her feet during her late-night snack raids. The sigh of her bedroom door closing when she needed space she didn't yet know how to ask for. I could still hear it all, even when there was no sound. Grief works like that sometimes, not loud or sharp, but ghostly and familiar. Like the echo of something you once loved too much to fully let go. The next morning, I opened the windows and let the fall air in. The trees had turned, flaming with orange, yellow, and the deep red that always reminded me of the plaid jacket she wore in 6th grade. The one she insisted made her look like a girl who read. I sat on the porch with my coffee and watched the neighborhood go about its business. Kids running late for school. A couple walking their dog, pausing to wave like they always did. Everything moved forward, even when you didn't. I wasn't bitter, not anymore. Just older. Wiser, maybe. And grateful, in a strange way, that I had lived long enough to understand what it means to love someone without needing them to return it the way you expect. Rita called later that afternoon. "I heard she's pulling out of the speaking circuit for a bit," she said, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. Told one of her team she needs to reevaluate her brand authenticity. I smiled into the receiver, not smug, just tired. "She'll figure it out," I said. "She always does. That was never the problem." Rita paused, then said, "You're not going to answer her, are you?" "No," I replied, without hesitation. Not because I'm angry, but because we already had the conversation. She just wasn't ready to hear it then. "Maybe she is now," Rita offered gently. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not starting over. Not again." It wasn't about holding a grudge. It was about understanding my own limits. For years, I had given and given, hoping she'd turn around and see the man who had never stopped standing behind her, even when she faced the other way. And when she didn't, I stepped back. That boundary wasn't punishment. It was preservation. Loving someone from afar doesn't mean you love them less. It just means you love yourself enough not to keep bleeding for someone who only notices you when they're wounded. I think there's this lie we tell ourselves about family, that blood automatically earns forgiveness, that connection equals closeness, that parents are supposed to keep reaching out no matter how many times they're slapped away. But that's not real. That's not life. Sometimes, your child grows into someone you wouldn't choose to know. And sometimes, you still love them, but you love them quietly, from a distance, with the door locked and the porch light off. That night, I walked out to the edge of my property where the old mailbox stood. I hadn't touched it in weeks, not since I mailed her the letter. The flag was down. Nothing new had come. And that was okay. I reached into the mailbox anyway, out of habit more than hope. Empty. I let the door swing shut and stood there for a while, staring at the horizon where the sun had started to bleed into the clouds. The kind of sunset that makes you feel small in the best way. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of waiting. I went back inside, poured myself a small glass of bourbon, and sat at the kitchen table where the old photo album still lay. I flipped through it slowly, not lingering too long on any one picture. There she was, smiling with a gap in her teeth. There she was in a graduation cap too big for her head. There we were, father and daughter, before ambition rewrote her memories and silence replaced conversation. I closed the book gently, my fingers resting on the cover like I was pressing a wound closed. I didn't need her to come back. Not really. What I needed was what I had given myself, a sense of peace, of finality, of worth that wasn't dependent on someone else's recognition. She could go on building her empire, rebranding her pain, curating her story. That was her right. But I had earned the right to exist in truth too. And the truth was, I had loved her deeply. But I would no longer trade that love for access to her world. The next day, I got a knock on the door. A delivery driver, holding a flat, square package. No return label. Just my name. I took it inside, opened it, and found a framed photo, one I hadn't seen in years. It was me and her, sitting on the floor of our old living room, her curled up against my chest, asleep, a bowl of popcorn spilled between us. On the back, scribbled in permanent marker, were the words, "I remember." I didn't cry. I just sat there for a long time, looking at the photo, then placing it on the shelf beside the others. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. A gesture. A thread. I didn't know if she meant it as closure or an opening. I didn't need to know. I had nothing left to offer except my boundaries, my silence, and a love that refused to disappear even when the relationship did. Some heartbreak doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the people you love the most when they forget where they came from. If this story struck a chord, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose peace over proximity? Let's talk about it. Your story might help someone else feel seen. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that speak to the heart. See you soon in the next story.